G'day and welcome to Does It Matter? For most of human history, we needed each other. No one person could provide everything they needed in order to survive, let alone thrive. So right through hundreds of thousands of years of hunter-gatherer living, probably 400,000 years of that, and the last 10,000 years, perhaps more, of settled agrarian and later industrial living, we've always needed each other because you needed people to be able to do various roles. You know, people had to raise kids, people had to go and hunt, people had to go and farm, people had to do heavy work, people had to do light work, finicky work, dexterous work. There was lots of work and everyone had to do some. Otherwise it didn't work. People went hungry, people went unclothed, shelters fell apart, so on and so on. Fences fell down, animals were lost, things were stolen. Society would fall apart unless everyone played their role. Since the late industrial period, especially with the advent of modern capitalism and social welfare, no one needs anyone. The state and the big economy provides everything. You don't need anyone in your family past sort of your ability to, once you can work, once you can get a job and earn money, you don't need your family. You don't need your friends. In a functional existential way, you do not need them. And I'm not talking about social and emotional and needs and like biological needs. Yes, of course you do. But in terms of your existence and even your ability to thrive within the economy, you don't need anyone else. In an interpersonal sense, you don't need them. So our interpersonal world used to be intrinsically mixed up and threaded through our practical surviving necessity world. And that's no longer the case in the sense that we are used to have experiencing for the last, 500,000 years or so. We don't experience that anymore. So we have all these intrinsic needs that have developed and are built into our biology through, millions of years of evolution. But it doesn't correlate very well in this environment because you go to the economy for your income. You go to the government for assistance and health and all those things that you have to have. Your uncle, dad, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, sisters, brothers, they do not provide those things anymore. They don't. They're not even part of it in most cases. You work at a job that you choose and a career that you choose. They work in a job that they choose and a career they choose, and you hook up on, hook up, shouldn't use that term, but you get together on weekends and say hello and go and have dinner with each other. Everyone has become a recreational tab in each other's lives. We're not necessary. You're not actually necessary. And I think that without that necessity, in a culture like ours, which is hedonistic and hyper-individualistic, you're going to get some really interesting results, and that's a nice way of saying it. You only have to look around. Look around, We've got divorce rates that have gone from 8% 60, 70 years ago, 8% in Australia, 8, 9%, to almost 60%. If you include separations in relationships that aren't married, which outnumber marriages now, then you're looking at more like, over a 10 to 15 year period, you're looking at 80% of relationships failing. So, or more. So, social cohesiveness, intact families, community's gone. Like we've shrunk our families down and we're splitting our families up as well. It's shrinking them down. So there's no community anymore. Who's got the time? Who's got the resources anymore? The surplus resources that were required to push some of that back into community to build into tribal bonds. We don't have that anymore. And two generations now increasingly obsessed with screens and less able to negotiate the complexities of social body language. We have people who don't know how to socialise very well at all, we have a whole culture that's, woke culture in particular, that's lost entire chunks of common sense evolutionary wisdom. because we've forgotten. Because it's easier to be entertained than to educate yourself. So that's what a lot of people do. And because we don't need each other anymore, there's no pressure outside of earning a living to do anything that you don't want to do. This isn't necessarily a good thing. I like it in some ways, but there are ways in which it's not good. And we seem to be really lousy humans at balancing pros and cons. Things are very binary. They're good, they're bad, they go into a different group. This one goes over there, this one goes over there, black, white, so on. Sorry to disabuse you of this illusion, but there's no such thing. There's no black, there's no white, there's no right, there's no wrong in the sense that you think there is. There's no absolute sense of anything. Gravity is about as close as we get to an absolute force in this universe. No, everything has to be thought about. That's why we have these big brains. It has to be assessed, analysed, thought about, considered, and it has to be contextual to some degree. In the context that we live in now, in this culture, because we don't need each other anymore, and because there's no driving physical forces that really do push us together, we're moving apart. By 2030, 51% of women will be single and childless. That's never happened before in history. And if you think that's not a catastrophic thing, my suggestion would be to read some books on economics to do with population fluctuations, okay? And look at some basic anthropology too, because it gets worse, not better, unless we do something very, very, very stringent about it. I don't like the good idea of the state doing anything, though they can incentivize, and that's not a bad idea. But basically, we're not having anywhere near enough children. We're generating more and more people who are socially inept, cannot talk to each other, cannot read each other very well. Some people have argued that we've got the rise of autism. I just think we have a rise of people who don't get out enough. We have a rise of people who can't read each other enough, who don't spend enough time face to face, who don't spend enough time skin to skin. We're having less sex than any previous generation. So all the previous generations have had more sex. But the Gen Zs, the X's down, we're having progressively less sex. The poor Gen Zs are having almost nothing. 33% of Australian men under 30 or under are virgins, which again is unprecedented in history. People are male and females are generally having less sex, less communication, less contact. And that's in large part due to culture and economy, the two working together. Driving people apart, giving us alternatives that are not very good alternatives, but are very seductive, very easy. And taking away all the social boundaries. Now, I'm an atheist. I don't like religion. I'm not a particularly great fan of it. But religion was one of the things that provided some of those social constraints. We had environmental constraints, economic constraints, and social constraints. Now they're all gone. Nothing makes you a good person unless you want to be a good person. And nothing makes you don't have to honor any commitment. You don't have to keep your word. You don't have to be honest. You don't have to do anything other than what is required to earn your money. So everything has become orientated along lines of work. You need to be as honest as you need to be at work. You need to be as industrious as you need to be at work, and that's it. And it doesn't extend it to anything else because we don't have an overarching moral framework anymore. We don't have that. Unless you're deeply religious, we don't have that. So how you are at work is not necessarily going to be how you are anywhere else, and it often isn't. We aren't the same people at all. We're fragmented. We're socially inept. Many of us are becoming increasingly so, isolated, and we're having less children. We're engaging less and less in society, and society as a result is becoming thinner and thinner and thinner, and things that get too thin tear. They break. So we might want to consider how we got here. How did it happen? We might need to put some things back into place. I don't think that all roles should have been thrown out. I think men and women are different, quite different in some respects, and it's a complementary difference. I think that we focus far too much on equality, which in itself is problematic as an idea simply because it's not real. We're not equal. Everyone is different. Everyone varies. Abilities vary. Capacities vary enormously amongst both individuals and between men and women. It's just insane to think otherwise. And that it's become a catchword that we can't use. I believe in fairness. I think we should be fair, compassionate and fair. We should try to be as fair as we can. And fairness requires a conversation. The problem with equality and equity and all these new buzzwords is that they mean whatever the person says to you, whoever's hitting you over the head with it, that's what it means, what they say it means. You know, words as weapons instead of words as communication. We need to go back to something like fairness, because at least fairness invites the question. What do you mean by fair? Aha, now we have a conversation about disposition of duties, expectations. We can go into a whole range, a branching tree, a brainstorm of possibilities, and we get to discuss all those things, and that's what produces a healthy society, healthy communities, healthy families, healthy relationships, is brave, open, non-taboo conversations about anything, because you're going to have conversations about almost everything if you're healthy. We're not healthy. We don't live in a healthy society in that respect. We're relationally a mess, and increasingly there are economic issues as well. It all touches on itself. It's all interwoven. We've tried to separate it and compartmentalize it and categorize it as much as we can, but that's an illusion. Underneath everything, we still need everyone. You know, if all the plumbers went on strike, the electricians went on strike, the road guys went on strike, the rail guys went on strike, society would grind to a halt. Power guys went on strike. Like we need everyone. It's just hidden. It's hidden behind formal arrangements within the economy, formal arrangements within our nation states. It used to be people you knew. It used to be people you cared about. And that's what built a lot, maintained a lot of the relationships that we had and kept them strong. We don't have that anymore. There's no need for anyone in your life other than the emotional needs, which fluctuate. And the problem with emotions are, today I like you, tomorrow you're boring, the next day you're interesting again. That's human beings, more or less. Novelty is a big deal for women more than men, but it's still a big deal for everyone. Okay? And we are prone, when we come from an emotional place, to be erratic, to be hedonistic, unrealistic children in some respects. Without those natural constraints we've had for millions of years, without the social constraints we've had for the last 10,000, what the fuck do we do? How do we conduct ourselves? How do we do this? These are conversations we need to have. These are conversations that need to happen between us for the next few decades to make a better society, because at the moment, we're falling into a damn pit. While so many things are getting better, we are more unhappy than we were 40 years ago. Women especially are more unhappy. Never have we had more privilege, more affluence, less violence, less everything than we do now, and yet we're more unhappy. Mental health epidemics. We're richer than ever. We have homeless epidemics. We have a growth in poverty for the first time in 100 years over the last 3. We've got some issues here, and they're social issues. They're actually social issues. They're cultural issues. And they're based on the fact that we didn't understand ourselves. We didn't really grasp how vulnerable we would be when we got everything that we wanted, or more or less. There's no generation in history prior to 1960 that wouldn't think we were living the dream right now in every way, shape or form. Everyone for the last 10,000 years would think, you guys are in utopia, you're in heaven. But we don't. Because we aren't. It's all relative to some degree, yes. But we don't. And why aren't we even remotely grateful for where we're at? Why don't we need each other? Because we kicked out a few chocks that perhaps we shouldn't have kicked out. Or we certainly didn't replace them with anything that would do the same job. We just all thought we could walk into the sunset side by side. Nah, not going to happen. People are selfish. We're inherently, to some degree, selfish. We need to discuss with each other how we should conduct ourselves with each other. We need discipline. We need constraints. We need limitations as well as freedoms, or we're fucked. Oos.